the story of our world every day. Listen and your heart may open up. If ever you feel frightened of our world that's washed away, a mother is a mother, come to us. Women, 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 women. Women sew the fabric of our world every day. History of violence made it through. The stories that we share will all live on, and so we say these truths are our gifts passed on to you.
Welcome to the hashtag 101 Nights show, brought to you by the Scheherazade Project. I'm Lisa Liebau, co-founder with Julia Alvarez. We're coming down to the wire. During this final week before Election Day 2020, we're hosting multi-artist specials each night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Please leave a comment in the chat about what hashtag 101 Nights has meant to you these past few months. More importantly, now is the time. If you haven't already done so, cast your ballot in this most important election. If there are long lines, bring food, something to read, or better yet, tune in to hashtag 101 Nights to pass the time. We'll be streaming a marathon of all episodes from 1 to 101 all day long on Election Day. This is it. Vote, everyone. A special thank you to our partner, the Enoch Pratt Free Library in Baltimore, for producing and curating tonight's show.
The Enoch Pratt Free Library is honored to work in conjunction with the Scheherazade Project as we celebrate a women's right to vote. The Scheherazade Project is a women's activism through storytelling arts movement that uses the power of art, female creativity, solidarity, and courage in promoting social justice, nourishing our spirits, and enabling a more beloved community. I'm Laura Hazan. I'm a librarian with the Enoch Pratt, as well as a fiction writer. And I will be your MC for tonight. You can also find more about the Scheherazade Project on Twitter and Instagram at 1001 US Nights, or on YouTube and Facebook by searching the Scheherazade Project. Pratt is also streaming live on Facebook. So hello to Pratt patrons that are watching us on Facebook. Welcome. Tonight's program features 5 artists from Baltimore telling the story through prose, poetry, music, and visual arts. This program is being recorded in addition to the Facebook Live, and will be rebroadcast on the Scheherazade Project social media in the last week of October. So, we have a nice crowd tonight. It's good to see all of you. Just as a reminder, if you can all stay muted during the presentations, we will have a 5-minute break after the third artist performs, where you can unmute yourself and you can ask some questions. And also at the end of the night, at around, it'll probably be about 8:20 or so, we will, you can also unmute yourself and ask us questions or information, further information. So, without further ado, I will introduce the first artist, who is me. I feel sort of silly, but I'm going to read my bio in third person. Laura Hazan is a librarian with the Enoch Pratt Free Library, where she runs the weekly Light Street Writers Exchange. She completed her first novel, Little Boxes, while attending the Your Novel Year program at Arizona State University's Piper Writing Center. I am currently seeking representation for my novel. In addition, her work has been published in Natural Bridge, Sauce Magazine, and Strongly Worded Women, an anthology for the hashtag Year of Publishing Women. In 2019, Laura was a writer in residence for the Highlandtown Arts District in Baltimore, where she resides with her son, her husband, and our one-eyed dog, Bo. You can find more information about me and my writing at laurahazan.com. That's LauraHazan.com. So it sounded like a couple more people joined us. Welcome. I am going to read a short story tonight. Sort of a bit of a funny story behind the short story. I used to live in St. Louis, and I'm still very much in touch with my book club there. And several months ago, they asked me if I was going to write a pandemic story. And I said, no, I'm living the pandemic. I don't want to write about it. And then about 2 months ago, I participated in a writing program called Writers in Motion, where we wrote short stories based off a photo prompt. And what do you know? I wrote a pandemic story. So here is Not the Grand Tetons. The photo of the Grand Tetons in the National Park book Ellie perused reminded her of that rusty Airbnb she and Al rented one weekend in the Adirondacks. Advertised as a yurt, the pictures looked lovely, the reviews were great, and they looked forward to a quiet retreat. When they arrived, they were greeted with a shed-sized concrete building. Nothing soft, round, or yurt-like about it. Damn, she missed Al. She ripped the photo out of the book and stuffed it in her bag. She liked to save things that reminded her of happier times. As a librarian, she never dreamed she'd destroy books, but she was no longer a librarian. She was simply a survivor, a remainer. She took her time returning to the shelter, relishing the fresh air and the broad blue sky. It hardly seemed real that a world filled with such natural beauty could also be infinitely dangerous. She climbed the 4 flights to her floor in the former dormitory, threw a roll of paper towel to Jim for watching her place, and went into her room. Dropping her knapsack, Ellie pulled out a box of bandages, a tube of triple antibiotic ointment, 2 more rolls of paper towel, and a Motor Trend magazine. She'd met a man on the bus going west. With his salt and pepper hair, love of classic rock bands, and muscle cars, this kindred soul reminded Ellie of her oldest brother, also gone. Ellie wasn't much into cars, but thought the magazine might be a good distraction. She threw it onto a pile of other items that would also be good distractions. 5 years into the pandemic, the government decided to empty every city. So many had died, Al included. Officials assured every remainer in New York, Boston, and DC would easily fit inside Kansas. Every passenger on the trip west had been given thorough exams, background checked, and DNA tested. They had to pass each step to qualify for the relocation program. It disgusted her that everyone had to be deemed worthy of their new life. It took 5 days for the buses to reach Columbia, Missouri. Rumors spread at every rest stop. There would be no room for them. They were going to prison camps. They'd been tagged during the DNA test, and Kansas only held danger. Ellie knew Columbia, great college town, lots of libraries. She wasn't one to buy into exaggerations, but why risk it? She felt safer on her own anyway. As soon as the bus arrived, she grabbed her bags and headed toward the restrooms, where she stayed in a stall until the bus left. It seemed too easy, but it worked. It had been 6 months since she ditched the bus. She found comfort living in a former dorm filled with squatters. She'd secured a spot in a supply co-op when she arrived, so she only had to scavenge for supplies 3 times a month. The rest of the time she stayed inside, mostly. Loud voices filled the hallway as Ellie put away the bandages. She only had a single room, so she devised numerous workarounds for storage and protection. She trusted the rest of the residents, but not that much. A broken mirror with a frame became a Franklin mirror. With a glass cutter and some plumber's putty, she'd crafted the angled device so she could investigate disturbances in the hallway. She peered into the mirror. Damn it! 3 armed men threw people against the wall and showed them a clipboard. Bob down the hall pointed in her direction. She had a .22 pistol at the ready and had rigged up a device to hurl household objects at any intruder. With the pull of a string, an office stapler sharpened to a shiv would swing off a shelf, then hopefully into flesh. Ellie took her position, just as she'd practiced, and waited for the door to be kicked in. Her damp hands were simultaneously on the pistol and the stapler string. Then came a knock. Homeland Security guys don't knock. What bullshit is this? Ellie shifted her weight and pulled the safety on the pistol. Another knock, this time paired with an explanation. We're looking for Ellie Sanchez. We know you're in there. Don't do anything stupid. These knocks baffled her. Why were they being polite? These kinds of visits didn't end with tea and crumpets. The spot in her lower back where she always felt hot flashes began to warm. She tucked the revolver into the waist of her pants and took a risk. "This is Ellie," she shouted. "What do you want?" "We need some identification before we can share that with you. Put your eye up to the peephole." They scanned her eye, and the machine made a familiar beep. "We need a librarian, ma'am." "You have a library emergency? What kind of crap is this? Did you guys forget how the Dewey Decimal System works?" She pulled a little tighter on the booby trap string. "I'm not the right Ellie. I don't even read." A different, deeper voice came through the door. "We need you to come with us. We'd rather do this peacefully." A threat, but not one that frightened her. She didn't know why. Some instinct told her everything would work out, so she opened the door. "Can you please tell me what this is all about?" They didn't answer. She followed them out of the dorm to a car. They indicated she should step inside. A woman seated in a gray suit and a perfect bun at the nape of her neck held her hand out to Ellie, and they shook. "Suzanne Miller, Secretary of Homeland Security, nice to meet you. You're a librarian, correct?" "You obviously know the answer to that question. How did you find me?" Ellie said. "We've known where you were since you left the bus." Ellie wrinkled her nose. "Of course you did." Miller smoothed her bun. "Enough chit-chat. I'll get straight to it. You're the last surviving librarian in the U.S. We need you at the LC. Last surviving librarian? Whatever this was, it had gone too far. Ellie rubbed her hands on her jeans. "This is some kind of joke, right?" Miss Miller pulled out a tablet and showed Ellie the headlines. She knew certain professions were wiped out by this virus, but she hadn't heard about the librarians. Her coworkers, colleagues from ALA, all of them, her whole profession, gone. This is crazy, Ellie finally responded. I know nothing about the Library of Congress. There has to be someone else. I know some well-qualified retired librarians. Maybe they're still okay. If by okay you mean alive, then no, you're it. We're taking you back to DC. I have no choice, do I? Clearly, no. Ellie returned to her dorm room to pack up. She took only what she had originally arrived with in Columbia and the gun. She gave her key to Bob and told him to share her supplies. Then she left, and with her few bags, climbed into a van. As they drove away, the doors locked, and that's when she saw it in small print on the rear window. Squad Fahrenheit 451. And that's my story. Thank you. All right. That was kind of fun. Now I am going to introduce our second performer. Is Petula. Petula Caesar is a multi-talented artist, journalist, author, and poet. Petula has been a contributing writer for Baltimore's former alternative weekly, City Paper, the Afro-American newspapers, and Baltimore Magazine. She is also a performance poet, lecturer, and storyteller who has shared her works, wit, and wisdom at popular Baltimore signature events like Artscape, Stoop Storytelling, City Lit Festival, Arts Lab, and Charm City Kitty Club. Her current book, She's Such a Bright Girl, An American Story, won an honorable mention at the North Street Books Prize for Creative Nonfiction. She produced a series of 3 virtual live music concerts over the summer of 2020 in her role as Director of Community Engagement for the Baltimore Rock Opera Society. It has over 8,000 views and counting. In partnership with the Creative Alliance, she was also able to bring one of those shows to the Kennedy Center's Arts Across America virtual stage. That's had over 12,000 views and counting. You can find more information about Petula and her work at petulacaesar.com, petulacaesar.com.
It's so weird to hear people talk about stuff you've done. It's very uncomfortable. I don't like it. But it was not that bad that time, so thank you. Okay, I'm going to jump right into it. I am reading a chapter from my book, She's Such a Bright Girl, An American Story. That's me, second grade, my version of an afro. This is chapter 1 of the book. I gave birth to my daughter, Jasmine Marie Lorraine, on Friday, September 27th, 1991, at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. She was named after the actress and dancer Jasmine Guy, one of the stars of the popular television show A Different World, my absolute favorite television show at the time. Jasmine Guy played the rich, snobby Hillman College student Whitley Gilbert, and the role made Guy the it girl of that moment in African-American pop culture. I asked Tamal, Jasmine's dad-to-be, if he liked the name Jasmine for our daughter-to-be, and he did. Jasmine's 2 middle names were the middle names of her grandmothers, my mother and Tamal's mother, respectively. Additionally, the middle name Marie is a bit of a tradition on my mom's side of the family. When my daughter was born, I found I had given birth to myself. Jasmine was chubby, dark-eyed, round-faced, round-eyed, big-headed, light-skinned, and kinky-haired, just like me. When Jasmine went with the nurse to the nursery at the hospital, Tamal went to see her, and my mom found him sitting outside the nursery looking quite dejected. When my mom asked what was wrong, he said, "Man, that's Tula's baby. Ain't nothing of me in her nowhere." "She doesn't look nothing like me," he said when I asked him about it later. "She's all you. She looks just like you. Same color as you, not even a little bit brown, a little red bone baby." He seemed extremely disappointed. It wasn't the response I expected from a man fortunate enough to have his firstborn child arrive healthily into this world. It never occurred to me Jasmine's father would be anything other than loving towards her. Tears of joy had filled his eyes when I told him I was pregnant. He gave a heartfelt declaration of love for both of us as he touched my stomach, eyes wide with amazement, telling me he couldn't wait to be the best father in the world. Tamal grew up without his dad, and he spoke of his dad's absence quite often. It always troubled him. "I can't wait to be a father to our baby," he said, in the softest, gentlest voice imaginable. "I want to be a good father, the father I never had, and I swear I will be." He repeated this throughout my pregnancy. Would our daughter's light skin change his desire to be a good dad? On the other hand, I knew my father's sentiments about Jasmine's complexion would be the exact opposite of Tamal's. My dad expressed endless concerns about his future granddaughter's complexion during my pregnancy, but I didn't have the energy to address his comments about darkening the line in our family. After Jasmine's birth, my dad adored his little Jazzy Poo, as he called her. His pride in being a grandfather poured out of him. The mere mention of Jasmine's name made him smile brightly. His face turned into the sun. I did all I could to block out my thoughts about how much his adoration had to do with her coloring, trying not to wonder how he would have felt about a dark-skinned grandchild. One Sunday morning when Jasmine was 4 years old, we went to visit my parents. My mom and dad were in the kitchen, my mom at the stove making pancakes, and my dad sitting at the kitchen table. Jasmine ran over to Pop and hugged him tightly around his knees. He picked her up and placed her on his lap, balancing her gingerly, the huge sunshiny smile she always brought out of him in place. Jasmine snuggled up close to him, burying her face in his chest. He began gently stroking her head. I remembered how he would often stroke my head when I was little. I recalled how protected it made me feel, how safe and sound and secure, like nothing in the world could hurt or harm me. And as he stroked Jasmine's hair, my dad looked over at me with great affection. My heart swelled. Before I could say, "I love you, Dad," my dad said, "Petula, you have a beautiful little girl here. You should be proud of her. But it is a shame about her hair." Jasmine immediately sat straight up. Her smile disappeared. She grabbed at her hair with both her little hands, pulling at it, her face full of abject horror. Pop, she cried out. "What's wrong with my hair?" She tugged and tugged and tugged, pulling harder and harder. "What's wrong with it? What's wrong?" I rushed over to her, tearing her from his lap. I was livid. My daughter saw the dark anger in my eyes and asked in an even louder voice, "Mommy, what's wrong? Is it my hair? What's wrong with my hair?" She began to cry. My father responded to her outburst with, "Jazzy, what are you crying for? Stop that." And then he turned to me. "You know exactly what I mean, Petula. She's pretty, lovely complexion, smart. But this hair just isn't what we hoped for." He shook his head to emphasize the point. Somehow, I managed to cap my rage long enough to ignore my father, bounce Jasmine on my hip, smile sweetly and say, "No, baby, your hair is beautiful." I touched her hair with as much tenderness as I could muster, winding my fingers gently through her kinks, trying to will the reassurance into her 4-year-old body. I moved my hand to her face, drying tiny tears. Jasmine placed her head against my shoulder, and I closed my eyes, feeling the generations of hurt swirling around the room. When I opened my eyes, I looked over at my mother, as I had so many times during my childhood, during moments like these. I stared at her as hard as I could. She stood by the stove. I thought about how most of my childhood memories of her were of her being in the kitchen. I thought about how every time I looked toward her for support when my dad did this, she was usually feeding him. Despite our history, despite all the times she let my father pull my sense of self out from under me, despite the hurt she knew I'd suffered because of what he wanted me to be, I still looked to my mom. I needed her to intervene. After all, this time it wasn't for me, it was for her granddaughter. Our eyes locked. I silently pleaded with her, begging her to join me in stopping my dad from hurting my baby. I beseeched her harder than I ever had in my life, asking her not to allow this to be our legacy. I searched her face, and though I felt the disapproval of my dad's words vibrating through her, she said nothing, not a word. She looked over at her husband and gently shook her head, but her mouth remained closed. After a few long moments, she turned away from all of us. After she turned away, I looked back down at my daughter, who was soothing herself in my arms. She had placed 2 fingers in her mouth, which she always did when she was upset, and was sucking them. With her other hand, she was playing with my hair. I said, "Sweetie pie," and she looked up at me, dark eyes still cloudy and confused. "Why don't you go into the living room and find something to watch on television for a few minutes? I need to have a few words with Papa." She released my hair and touched her own. After watching her play in her own hair for a few seconds, I raised my hand to her hair and joined her. Her fingertips found mine and our fingers locked together for a moment, strands of her hair pressed between our palms. I knew how I handled her in this moment would impact her for years to come. "Your hair is just fine, baby. It's beautiful, just like you." Still unsure, Jasmine turned her head slightly to look back over at her grandfather. He didn't return her gaze. He still sat stony-faced and angry, looking straight ahead. She finally seemed a bit more at ease. I kissed her cheek and she smiled and kissed mine. She climbed down out of my arms. Once she left the room, I let the dam break. I was loud, louder than I'd ever been in my life when speaking to my dad. I made no effort to be respectful, to be mindful that he was my dad. I made no attempt to remember his past, to remember the seeds of self-hate sown into him so young. Now he was someone who hurt my baby. My memories of him doing the exact same things to me flew around in my head like a tornado. By displaying so many self-hating behaviors, he constantly reminded me I wasn't good enough. To him, everything was wrong with me from head to toe because I was Black, and only being white could solve it. It all came bubbling to the surface. It added volume to my voice. I cursed at him. I cried and said things about self-hatred, about how well so many Black people oppressed other Black people. The rage I suppressed all my life flew at him full throttle for at least 5 minutes. My fists were tightly clenched the whole time. My mother made a few comments about me shouting at my father, telling me to be respectful. I ignored her the same way she ignored me all my life. I was so hurt by my dad and disappointed in my mom, tears began to sting my eyes, and I started to yell at them both, even louder than before. I began blubbering. The angrier I got, the more incoherent I became, and the deeper my sobs became. I was breaking in half. I yelled so loud and so long and with so much force and emotion, I started to black out a little, floating in and out of consciousness. I would come to, hear a little bit of what was happening, then black out again. My brain became overloaded and started short-circuiting. The connection wouldn't hold the entire time. When I fully came back to myself, Jasmine and I were sitting in my car. A sharp band of pain wound itself around my head. "What happened, Mommy?" Jasmine asked. "I heard so much yelling. Are you okay?" I drove away in silence. I really didn't have an answer. It took the rest of my life for me to find one. Thank you.
I love that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
It was just the whole theme running through that chapter was excellent. I can also relate to, turning into a mama bear.
Yeah.
It's one thing to mess with us. Don't mess with our kids.
Yeah, you do what you want to me, but see, now I have to cut you. Now I have to cut you.
All right. Thank you so much, Petula.
Thank you.
On to our third artist for tonight, Christine Sajecki. Christine Sajecki is an independent artist practicing in Baltimore, Maryland. She mostly works in encaustic, a malleable and sculptural paint made of beeswax, pigment, damar resin, and other materials harvested from her environment. She works the surfaces with brushes, torches, gouges, and blades. Sajecki brings this excavation and accretion of surface to other media and drawings through her physical process. Her paintings and illustrations have been included in many juried and solo exhibitions throughout the United States and Europe. Her work appears in print in several albums, periodicals, and books of poetry and fiction. She has been a guest lecturer, teacher, or resident artist at several institutions and community centers nationally and internationally, including the American Visionary Art Museum here in Baltimore and Fundarte in Panama City, Panama. While living in Savannah, Georgia, she co-founded the Flannery O'Connor Annual Birthday Parade and served on the board of directors and as president of the Flannery O'Connor Childhood Home Foundation for several years. You can find more information about Christine and her work at christinesajecki.com. That is CHRISTINESAJECKI.com. Welcome, Christine.
Hello, welcome to my studio. If I'm prone to being quiet, so if anyone can send me a hand or something if I get too quiet. This is my studio. Behind me are the paintings I've been working on over the last couple months. They are encaustic. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the medium and do a piece while I tell you a story. This is my medium. It's molten beeswax mixed with pigment. It's heating up on a pancake griddle right here. And here is a board that I have already painted with white pigmented encaustic paint and scraped it smooth with razor blades. And what I'm going to do is transfer this photograph. This is Lee Krasner's grave. She just used a natural stone for her gravestone. This here is where it sits. This, Lee Krasner, if you don't know who she was the wife of Jackson Pollock. So here is her gravestone, and here is his. It's huge, gorgeous, but it's huge. So, so yeah, what I'm going to do is rub this photocopy face down with this wooden spoon while I tell you things. So everyone knows who Jackson Pollock is, of course, because he changed the course of art history. He changed painting forever. No one could paint the same after him, whether you like his paintings or not. Every artist for every painting now has to consider what medium they're using and how they're using it and why they're using it and what they're saying and confronting their nature, what's uniquely them as they paint. It just couldn't be any other way after Jackson Pollock. And so Lee Krasner was born in New York, and she knew early on that she wanted to be an artist, and pursued it. She left her family and her family traditions. So now I'm going to pour just regular tap water on this I have rubbed it super hard down to this panel. It's all stuck. So I'm going to dissolve the paper and the copy toner will be stuck to the wax. So Lee Krasner, she worked so hard through the Depression. She was helping to employ other artists. She knew everyone. She was connecting all these artists together. She knew the people opening galleries and museums. She was just at the vanguard of what would become abstract expressionism. And Jackson Pollock came a little bit later. He was like a cowboy from Montana, and he was a good painter. He was a really good painter. But nobody knew it because he only really left the house to like punch cops and get drunk. He was a mess, and no one was really into Jackson Pollock early on. But when Lee Krasner met him, she immediately recognized what she'd been looking for, what she'd been cultivating in New York. It's like this world-changing art. And so all the work she had done in nurturing this fertile landscape, she just got behind him and pushed. And I'm glad she did. But so as I was learning about her life and her struggles and her service, her sacrifice, what she did, that's when I visited the cemetery and saw this startling contrast of the two sizes of stones. And my first thought, of course, was, what ignorant, chauvinist asshole has created this like monument to inequality? This is terrible. It hurt. It physically hurt, like to see these, knowing how hard that she worked all her life and how she helped him become what he was. And then just seeing this modest little humble stone next to this monument, was hurtful. But then of course, I realized it was Lee Krasner herself who had placed those stones. So like she had originally chosen this stone, by the way. So this is how it came out. There's a few missed spots. It's never perfect to photocopy transfer, but she had picked this stone for Jackson when he died. He had dug up all these stones from the yard that he rented a bulldozer and put all these glacial erratics from in the middle of the yard. He was going to do sculptures with them, but then he died. So she used one of those stones as his grave. And when she went to go be with it, she just found that it wasn't big enough to for her love. Everything she had felt for him, and everything she had put into him, everything he was, it just wasn't big enough. So a friend came upon this stone, and that's the one that she ended up using. And she would use this stone to sit on and be with him. And then when she died, this became hers. So I sat between those two graves for a long time. Every day I would ride my bike there while I was staying there and think about that, like that act of grace and service and sacrifice, and just like what that is to women. I had just left my marriage, so I was thinking a lot about these kinds of issues, trying to make peace with these wildly disparate stones. But in the end, I guess what I realized is that it's not the size. It is about the size of the stone, but it's also about the story that it tells. So I'm going to keep working on this piece. I'll post it somewhere. thank you for your attention. And good night. Thank you, Laura and Petula, for going first.
Thank you, Christine. That was fantastic. I don't know a lot about, I mean, I know who Jackson Pollock is. I don't know a lot about the relationship. I know there's some movies, but it really is such interesting symbolism, the two stones, and his being so giant and hers not. So yes, please, when you're done with the piece, you can either share it with me, and I'll make sure it gets posted, on proper social media. Because I would love to see your final product. Okay. So we're just going to take a little breather here, a little 5-minute break, just mostly for me to take a sip of water. I do, if anybody has any questions for myself or Petula or Christine, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or you can type your questions in the you can type the questions in the group chat. I do have a question for Christine. Where is this property and their graves?
It's way out on Long Island in the Hamptons in New York, in Springs, where the Pollock Krasner house is, where they moved from New York City, and lived out in the country together.
I was thinking Long Island for some reason, but like I said, I don't know enough about them. So it's like New York. Is it upstate out in Long Island? Okay, yeah, cool. And you were
has like Frank O'Hara and a lot of people you would recognize, Elaine de Kooning.
Oh, and were you doing like a fellowship or something like that, a residency out there?
I had a friend who was an ornithologist looking after plovers, so I was able to stay with him for a bit and explore the art world there while and learn a lot about plovers.
All right.
Christine, hi, this is Robin Papone. I love your I never thought about a romantic view perspective of a cemetery before, but I love it. I am looking at this little teeny weeny screen on my phone, and I wasn't sure with the one stone, the one rock that you transferred. Is there artwork all over it, or is that the texture itself of the stone? I wasn't, because I have such a small screen, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I can try to show it a little closer. Some of this is like the marks from my spoon, where my spoon might have missed the transfer. And some, but yeah, some is just the texture of the rock, and then the texture of the spoon from my transferring.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
I have a question on the chat for me. Is Ellie being forced to join the official book-burning firemen of Fahrenheit 451 or the Society of Book People in the Woods? That is from Marie Cummings, who happens to be my niece. And Petula had a similar question. She wants to know if Ellie's being drafted to be a firewoman. I'm not, I wasn't really sure where they were going to go after that, except I thought that she was in the van of the firemen. that she basically had just been snatched up by, the bad guys burning the books. And I guess I was sort of thinking maybe they would save the Library of Congress for last, since that houses most of the world's, a copy at least of everything that has ever been copywritten through the United States Copyright Office, and also tons of international collections. But maybe she is really with the book people. That would be cool. I'll have to think further on that.
I kind of thought she was gonna die, that they had killed all the other librarians. And
yeah, I mean, I guess that's a possibility too. That's kind of the interesting thing about working in a short story. It's just such a little snippet of time. And this was technically flash fiction because it was under 1,000 words. So I don't know. It's up to the reader's imagination. I know that's a really lame cop out. Okay.
Petula, this is Robin again. I found oh my goodness, your story it just hit a nerve because
I did my job.
I guess many families, in these Americas, have come under this issue. And I remember my grandmother, so many issues, and I always wanted to just shake her sometimes and say, please, why are you doing this to yourself as well as to the rest of us? Yeah. But you put it into words so powerfully, and I just really, the story just touched a nerve, and I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Writing the book was cheaper than therapy, so yeah.
Okay.
And I ended up in therapy anyway, so there you go.
How does your daughter feel about the book?
Well, we had a discussion about her being in it and what I would be sharing, and if she were okay with that. And she was. It's funny, she remembers it a little bit differently than I do. She remembers at the time just being very frightened because all of the adults were very angry and overwrought, and she knew it had something to do with her. So she felt like all children do, everything is their fault. She very much internalized the fact that she had made the family not peaceful somehow through something that she couldn't really do anything about, but somehow she was supposed to do something about it. So it kind of left me with kind of struggling because she really did love her grandfather, but was it in her best interest psychologically to kind of, because he wasn't going to change. At that time, he was well in his 70s. That was just, he was who he was going to be. So it was a lot of struggling, but she does remember it. She definitely remembers it as a painful experience. We talked a lot about how comfortable she would be with me bringing it up in the book. And after some conversation, she said that she was, and she actually said she was interested in seeing how I saw it as a parent, because she hadn't considered how awful it must have been for me until she read it. And she was like, well, yeah, I guess that was hard for you to kind of, but for me, it was act 2, because I had already seen it personally growing up. But it led to some good talks that she and I, needed to have. So ultimately, it was a good thing.
That's great. Any other questions?
Petula,
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you for writing that book. I mean, the colorism and the hair quality resonates so much, I think, for, a lot of people of African descent. How are you feeling? So the book is written and it's out there. Was there any pushback from any family members? I know a lot of times when you write sort of memoirs, it can become awkward, and that whole conversation is, it's an obvious one in, you know, the African American community, but it's not one that is a comfortable topic.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, you know, after writing the book, did you get pushback? Like, what was the general response?
I got some pushback. My father was very much revered in the family in general. So the fact that I had written bad things about him was a bit frowned upon. At my book release, a family member came to inform me of the displeasure. It was very like mafioso. It was like a cousin kind of came and said, I'm representing the family and this and that. And I'm like, oh, okay. So they weren't happy, but at the same time, I think they recognized that it was true. So as uncomfortable as they were with, I guess, me revealing certain things, no one actually was angry at me. They were more uncomfortable than anything, you know. So, and certainly like most Black families, there are certain, you know, pockets of, you know, darker skinned folks and lighter skinned folks and all the shades in between. So my understanding is some individual conversations have happened within the families, but for them, it was mostly discomfort. And I think they wanted to be angry, but it was true. So, you know, they weren't. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I imagine memoirs probably bring that kind of family stuff up.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah. I even myself have hesitated to write works of fiction because I think mostly, what would my mother think? My mother might read this. I suppose that's part of the courage that we need to have as artists. You know, we have to tell our stories. So before we get started, or before we return to with our fourth artist, I just want to give a quick word about our host tonight, the Pratt Library. We have launched a new website. Woohoo! It looks really great. It's reorganized based on what we know you want, and it's mobile friendly. So visit prattlibrary.org to check that out. In addition, for those of you in Baltimore, because I know we do have some people from outside of Baltimore, in fact, from around the country tuning in tonight. But for those of you in Baltimore, we have sidewalk service available at 14 of our Pratt locations. So our buildings are those buildings are open to our staff, and you can put books on hold as well as other materials. And you can come and pick them up on the sidewalk, just like you've been doing with carryout food. So our buildings are still not yet open to the public during this pandemic. You can also email items that need printing to those branches, and we will print those things out. And you can pick those up at on the sidewalk as well. And again, prattlibrary.org to find out how to do that. Pratt also has numerous virtual events like this one for adults, teens, and children every month. You can tune into a virtual story time, musical performances, book clubs, and many others. And again, you can find our current program offerings at calendar.prattlibrary.org. So I hope you join us for some other programs. I should put a little plug in for my own that Cherrie actually attends every Monday night at 6 p.m. We are doing the Light Street Writer Exchange virtually. It is a read and critique group for writers of at any point in their writing careers. We have people that read poetry, short fiction, long fiction, songs, memoirs. You read your own work aloud, and then the rest of the group critiques. So I've been running that for about 6 years, and I'm very proud that it has stuck around so long, and that we have a great core of people. Okay, so enough for my self-promotion. I would like to introduce Katie Long. Born in Baltimore, Katie Long has worked as the program director for the Friends of Patterson Park for the past 11 years. She is a fluent Spanish speaker and serves as the liaison to Patterson Park's Latinx community, and also serves on the Mayor's Hispanic Commission for Baltimore City. She has over 15 years experience working in community development, recreation, and conservation in Central America and the United States. Katie graduated from Towson University, where she was a proud member of the women's tennis team, and has a master's degree in intercultural communication from UMBC, where she was a Shriver Peace Worker Fellow. She served in the Peace Corps in Honduras, Peace Corps Response in Panama, and currently serves on the board of the National Peace Corps Association as the representative to the Americas. She has also performed with Maryland Improv Collective and the Baltimore Improv Group. She lives in Baltimore with her partner Annie and their dog Louie. We love our dogs here in Baltimore, so we put them in our bios. You can find more information about Katie on Facebook by searching for Katie Long 5895. So that's KATIE.LONG.5895. So welcome, Katie.
Great. Hi. Thanks. I do live in Baltimore with my dog, Louie, who can't decide how much of this he wants to be a part of. And then it occurs to me, too, that he could just like bark at any moment. So he might be part of my presentation. But thank you so much for having me. And I think I just feel like very lucky and humbled to be part of this group. So I'll try not to be too intimidated. But yeah, essentially, that was a great intro. Thank you. I'm just gonna like sing a quick song tonight. I play the ukulele and usually write silly little parody songs about things that happen in Baltimore and in my life or in Peace Corps with family or friends. But the song that I picked for tonight is not a parody one. It's an original one that I wrote almost 4 years ago now, during a time that the Baltimore community in Southeast, at least, was going through a really rough time. A lot of people were scared. There was a lot of high-profile detentions in the area, and yeah, it was not a fun time. So I wasn't feeling particularly silly, but I was thinking a lot about solidarity and supporting my friends and groups that I cared about that felt scared and under attack. And a good friend of mine during this time had said that in recognition that our privilege doesn't always extend to our neighbors, it means that their anxiety has to extend to us. So that's kind of what inspired the song. So I'm just gonna sing it. If can everybody hear that? Okay, and I'll just see if I can sing it from memory. I'm organic chemistry and your med school. I'm fermentation and your red wine. If you're the deep end, then I'm the kiddie pool. I'm just one word, and you're a rhyme. Because to get to you, they'll have to go through me. To get to you, they'll have to go through me. If they get to you, well, then you'll have company. 'Cause to get to you, they'll have to go through me. I'm the Badlands and your Mount Rushmore. If I'm the audition, then you're the part. I'm the cocktail hour and you're the dance floor. I'm the pericardium and you're the heart, because the pericardium surrounds the heart, so protects the heart. Because to get to you, they'll have to go through me. To get to you, they'll have to go through me. If they get to you, well, then you'll have company. 'Cause to get to you, they'll have to go through me. Para llegar a ti hay que pasar por mí. Para llegar a ti hay que pasar por mí. Si llegan a ti, pues estaré allí. Porque para llegar a ti hay que pasar por mí. To get to you, they'll have to go through me. To get to you, they'll have to go through me. If they get to you, well, then you'll have company. 'Cause to get to you, they'll have to go through me. That's it.
That was a great song. Perfect message, especially for today's climate. Loved it. Thank you so much. Okay. Our final performer for tonight is Cherrie Moore. By day, Cherrie is a PR consultant, Cherrie Woods, who works in arts and culture. At night, she is poet Cherrie Moore, whose candid narrative style of poetic verse inspires diverse audiences as she flows about life and love. Her spoken word is recorded on 2 CD projects, I Love Me Some Words and Love's Journey, and in her book, Free to Be Me, Poems on Love, Life, and Relationships. In addition, Cherrie hosts the Baltimore Poetry Series Words, Wine, and Wings. Her work has also been featured in the Patterson Literary Review, Understory Magazine, Poets Inc., and Maryland in Poetry. You can find out more about Cherrie at cherrieamore.com. That is CHERRIEAMOUR.com. Welcome, Cherrie.
So I'm actually going to read 3 poems tonight. The first one is called Black Lives Matter, That Street. I walked up that street today because the sun was hot, Baltimore summer hot, and the tall buildings on that street create a natural shade from the sun. I usually walk on the left side of that street until I get past the 3rd block to ensure that I won't see that building. My interview in that building had left me feeling bereft, just like a blues song. Somebody's getting hurt. Bereft because 2 days after the interview, I received an email lauding my display ideas, but sharing their concern about my lack of sophistication. I'm not one to think that every interview leads to a job, but the display on that building mirrored all of my ideas. And the phrase lack of sophistication reminded me of another white interviewer who said the same thing and then hired a white person who was the perfect example of no sophistication. But today I said to myself, enough already. You're stronger than this. Life goes on. You know who you are. And I walked on the right side of the street, looked up at the display on that building that had me etched all over them, and I let that pain go and smiled ever so slightly. Then I saw a sign, not a part of the building display, hanging at street level, so no one would miss it. Black Lives Matter. My smile faded as I shook my head in disbelief, turned away, crossed the street, and walked on. Thanks. That's number 1. Thank you. That's number 1. Thank you. My next piece is called The Afro Pick. When I learned artist Hank Willis Thomas's giant-size Afro pick was on display in Washington, D.C., I made a plan to see this important symbol of Black culture. Arriving in D.C., I got off the metro, walked to Rhode Island Avenue, and at the 3rd block, I sighted a clenched fist. It reminded me of the Black Power movement in the 60s and 70s and the greeting between Black folks, power to the people. As I walked closer, the base of the Afro pick and the metal cone loomed largely above the tree line, as if it belonged there, 28 feet high, 7,000 pounds, majestic, large, proud, and loud. I counted the 13 metal rods. 13 was the age I received my first Afro pick, the age I was allowed to celebrate my natural hair in an Afro style. That memory had me standing proudly with my self-esteem rising as high as that 7,000-foot Afro pick, just long gazing like a fool in love, standing in reverence, doing my best to extend that moment. And my last piece is called In My Skin. In my caramel-colored 5'6" frame, in my thick thighs and high round buttocks, toned arms, large forehead, large face, almond-shaped eyes, full lips, laugh lines, large hands, and high instepped feet, resides a finely grown woman. No more looking outside for guidance, but looking inside and upward for strength. Slowly and intentionally, I have blossomed into a middle-aged, non-blues wearing or carrying fireball who conquers her own demons and fills her own voids. In my caramel-colored aging face and frame, I have less time for looking back and ahead. No more letting my empty parts dictate my actions. I live in the now, deal with the real, learn how silence can be as powerful as words, and learn how to sashay out of a space that no longer fits and sit comfortably elsewhere in my skin. Thank you. Thanks.
So I'll make a little confession that I've heard those poems at our writers group, but you know what? It's really a different experience hearing you perform them tonight. You got a little bit of, different inflection and spots, and loved it. That was fabulous. So that is our final performance for the night. Thank you for watching. Does anybody have any questions for Cherrie or Katie, or even the earlier performers, Petula, Christine, or myself? I did have a question for Katie. I was curious to know how you learned to play the ukulele, and what had you pick up that particular instrument?
That's a good question. So I always did parody songs a cappella. So part of it was to try to be more generous to my listeners, to not have them have to always endure me singing a cappella. But my best friend in Peace Corps and I were in grad school together afterwards, and didn't have a lot of money, and felt like for Christmas we wanted to gift each other things that didn't cost any money. So I gifted her a song and surprised her with having learned to play the ukulele. So that was like my Christmas gift to her, and it ended up being a gift to me too, because now I play it and it makes me feel better.
Your song was fabulous.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Cherrie, how did you feel? So your Afro-Pick poem obviously was, it was about the sculpture, but it was also about your own hair and turning 13 and being allowed to have your natural hair. So how did you feel when you were hearing Petula's chapter?
It really resonated with me because I know when I was younger, I was, I guess, the lightest person in my family. And I heard I also was told I kind of had the worst hair. So for a long time, I had a lot of hair hang-ups. But growing up, I had two older sisters, and I just remember when they started wearing an afro, and I just thought it was so beautiful. But my mom thought, I was too young for that until I became a teenager. And so, that afro pick, and then hearing your stories, remembering how great it felt to get this afro pick and to be able to comb out my hair. And I think that was probably the first time that I really felt my hair was beautiful, was at that point where I could wear it in an afro. It was that turning point for me, because before I had heard, you don't have good hair, everyone else's hair is better. But when I was able to wear my hair in an afro, it just kind of changed that whole feeling about my hair for me. So it was interesting to hear your story, Petula, and some of the negative feelings that some people have, even within the Black race, about the quality of our hair or the texture of our hair. And so I can just remember that experience for me was the first time I really began to love my own hair. So that poem was, and seeing that giant size afro pick really brought back good memories for me.
Yeah, I remember my first afro. In fact, this is my first attempt at an afro, so I do remember very much how good it felt.
Okay, anybody have any other questions for any of us that performed tonight?
I want to thank Katie for explaining the pericardium in her song.
Yes.
My girlfriend's a nurse, so yeah, she appreciates that everyone knows that too.
Yeah, it helped.
Good.
Okay. Well, this was a wonderful night. Just a couple of things before we end. Tracy Diamond, who is kind of running the tech in the background for us tonight, also is the adult program coordinator for the Enoch Pratt Library. So thank you, Tracy, for running the tech, but also she posted in the chat group, in the chat, that we have a program survey, and she put the link there. So we would really appreciate if everybody that was here for the performance filled out the survey. And as a reminder, the Scheherazade Project performances are on Facebook and YouTube every night at 8 p.m. Specifically, tune in to watch the Scheherazade Project's Countdown to the Election from October 26th through November 2nd, when our Baltimore performance will be rebroadcast. Don't have an exact date yet, but I will certainly post that on social media when I do, but it definitely will be that week. So thank you for joining us. Good night, and please vote.
Thank you to all the sisters. We may be wrapping up the hashtag 101 Nights campaign on Election Day, but the Scheherazade Project will continue beyond this one event. We've gathered such an incredible community of strong, fierce, creative women whose voices and art can continue to change the world for the better. There's so much work to do. First, let's finish this job. Make sure your vote counts. Thank you to our generous donors. With your donations, we have been able to purchase video editing, transcription, and live stream scheduling software. We've been able to secure equipment like tripods, projector, lights, microphones. We've been able to upgrade social media accounts to business and Premiere. These are just a few examples of how your donation made it possible for us to produce hashtag 101 Nights. Without you, we couldn't have shifted our original plan of live performances in front of the White House to streamed performances online. Help us sustain and grow this beloved community by donating money, volunteering time, or by telling your friends about us. With your help, we'll be able to provide a wider platform for artists, produce higher quality videos, publicize our activism to bring voices to a wider audience, pay our interns, and hire an executive director. Please consider supporting us.
The stories that we share will all live on, and so we say these truths are our gifts passed on to you.